Good evening, good night, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. You have just watched the mighty Nearco winning the Grand Prix de Paris in 1938. Nearco was bred by Senatore Federico Tesio and owned by Marchese Mario Incisa della Rocchetta under the banner of Razza Dormello Giatta. When he went to stud, with his progeny, he completely changed the world of racing. You should bear in mind that nowadays, wherever there is a race, I'm talking about thoroughbreds all over the planet, at least over 90% of the runners, they carry Nearco's blood. And this is a phenomenal achievement. Today, I have to say that we have really a very special guest, a friend of mine since a long time. Is called Harry Findlay. Harry, welcome to the program.
Morning, Carlo.
Harry Findlay, a few years ago, has written a book, which I can show you now. It's called Gambling for Life. It's a fantastic book that, in my opinion, everybody should read it and should get it close to consult it. On the back cover, there is I read what is written on the back cover and what Harry said. When Warren Buffett dies, he will leave over 80 billion, but in his lifetime, he spent less than 2 million. There will be less than 80 pence in my will, but I have already spent over 20 million. Who do you think has got the maths right? And then there is another comment written by Sir Anthony McCoy. He said, to me, courage is having your last 250,000 pounds on something you have got no control over. That takes real balls.
No, I don't agree. I don't agree with that. I think Tony McCoy. I think Tony McCoy's balls are about 50 times bigger than mine. And I think,
anyway, Harry, can you briefly introduce yourself? Because if I'm right, your parents were, your mother was a nurse, your father was a paramedical. So how come that you started to be involved with horse racing and with betting?
Oh, Gambling for Life. We didn't know what name to come up with for the book, but one of the guys who works for the company who did it, that they come up with that, and it's a great name. And basically, as soon as I started gambling at school, it changed my whole life. I didn't really think about much else. 12, 13, playing pennies against the wall and stuff like that. I was never that much into cards. There was a lot of cards going on, but I've never been a massive, even from that early age. I've never really wanted to win off your mates more. I've wanted to win off bookmakers and so I've never been a real card player.
So sorry if I interrupt you. So we can say betting for life because you've never been a casino guy.
Yeah, no, I've never been a casino guy. No, the pain of losing in those places would be far too hard. I mean, I've had a couple of little naughty stories over the decades, but not of my own volition. And no, I wouldn't be a casino player or a card player really, but sport especially. I love the sport. I love two-sided contests for gambling, and of course football. Football's my main thing. I've been a football punter all my life really, and that's where I'm probably best at. But any form of gambling, I love all the sport gambling.
All the sport gambling, but I remember that because it's written in the book, and you told me several times, or your big bets in rugby when you were in Australia.
Well, rugby, the biggest bet obviously was the famous All Blacks bet that got beat. Aussie rugby is more or less the Aussie Rugby League, which I absolutely love, the NRL, but their chief executive doesn't understand how Betfair works, and because that's no longer on Betfair, I don't watch the whole season now, which is insanity.
Sorry, what insanity?
Yeah, the NRL in Australia have decided that, a bit like the horses, they want to take a lot more commission than we do in England. And in the rugby league over, they want to take more than 10%, and so they don't bet on the NRL on Betfair. So that's affected the turnover in the UK with regard to the Aussie rugby enormously. And it's a shame because I love the early morning live rugby, and I do miss it. I do miss for about 5-6 years. I was watching every single match every weekend in the NRL, and I was loving it, especially when you're getting up at 6-7 in the morning watching the live sport.
So you're talking about Australian rugby?
Yeah, Australian NRL rugby. And if you're listening, Peter Vlandis, get back in the room, get sorted out with Betfair, and get a commission rate sorted out so we can once again have the NRL back live running.
But when you were in Australia and you had that big bet, if I remember, was £2.5 million on the All Blacks.
Yeah, and I wasn't in Australia. I was at the ground. I was here. I was at the ground in Cardiff when it got beat. I was there.
Sorry.
I was there when it got. I was there.
Why at a certain time of the match you didn't hedge your money?
Well, I did at half time. The whole point of backing them for 18 months in advance was the fact that they were seeded 1 and Argentina were 8, because effectively I thought they were already in the semi-finals and I could trade. But it all went wrong on the first night of the tournament when France got beaten by Argentina, which meant that New Zealand had an extra match to win. They had to beat France in the quarterfinals. So I went to the game, and to be fair, with that happening and playing France instead of Argentina, I should have hedged a bit of my bet then, but I didn't. But at half time, I fortunately did a little bit. And with France were leading, I think 14-3. I did lay a bit back at 103 for that match, so I got sort of 600 grand back out the wreckage. But the pain was worse than the money. It was the fact that I'd told so many friends and ordinary people to really get stuck into the All Blacks, and that was the biggest pain.
And I remember that another big bet that you had in your life was tennis, Federer. I think that Federer gave you a lot of satisfaction money-wise with your bets.
Oh, yeah. Federer and Tiger Woods, they're the best memories of my life, really.
Federer and Tiger Woods.
Yeah, Federer and Tiger Woods, were the best, were my 2 biggest winners, for sure. Yeah, I loved, and it wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the money. It was, I knew I was a Federer fan at a very young age, and I was lucky. I was at Wimbledon, and he played Xavier Malisse in the second round. And in those days, there was no outside court coverage. No one saw the match, and it's one of the best grass court matches I've ever seen in my life. And they were both teenagers, and I thought, cool. I remember walking out the court thinking, how much am I going to earn out of these two? Xavier Malisse ended up with a heart problem. I think he got to a Wimbledon final, but he had a heart problem. But a lot of luck in gambling. Because that year I backed Federer to beat Sampras at 9-2, which he did. But I wasn't on outright big, and I wasn't going to get no fortunes out of him. And Tim Henman beat him after he beat Pete Sampras. Tim Henman beat Federer, and if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have got no money out of Federer, because then Federer had a lean spell. He didn't win for 18 months, and he got really down on himself when he got beat by Lewis Horner in Paris, and then he got beat at Wimbledon by Ancic, who served out of the world the next year. So the bookies went a bit quiet on Federer. And that was a time to step in. And
then at a certain time of your life, you move to horse racing, becoming an owner, quite an important owner. If I well remember, at the beginning or at a certain time, you were in partnership with Tony Bloom.
Yeah, no, to be honest, I've always bet on the horses, but as a young man in my 20s, I met Glenn Gill, who's now my best pal, and basically he does.
Which is the analyst of racing.
He's just a pro punter. He's been horse punting. He did 1 week as a painter and decorator, and then went on course. Initially, getting his basic wage out of stewards' inquiries and photos and a few bets. And for me, he's the best horse judge I've ever met. And I'm very lucky because I don't have any input on the horses at all. I just get told, Harry, have 1,200 on this, have £1,000 on this, or 400 on this. And I just do what I'm told with the horses. I have an opinion about once every 6 months, and it's only to have a little bit more or a little bit less on. Or funny enough, if Glenn bats a Tony Bloom horse, as I say in the book, I have a bit more on. And apart from that, my opinion is negligible. So that's a great thing as a gambler, to be able to not have the stress of. I don't think I could get a living out of horse racing on my own anyway. You know, I used to, as a young man, I'd go on and off, and when I was in form, I'd go more than I didn't. But ever since meeting Glenn, I've more or less left it to him, and I do the football on my own and a bit of sport on my own.
Now, if you don't mind, we have a short break. Don't go away. Stay with us. In your life, you own good horses, but I think that you own something absolutely spectacular, and that horse was Denman. I remember because you kindly invited me in your box when Denman ran and won at the time, the Hennessy Gold Cup at Newbury, carrying top weight. That was a phenomenal performance.
Yeah, it was one of my best buzzes with Denman. But with the horses, I was, as you know, I've always been a dog man, Carlo. I own good dogs and won derbies at Clonmel and Oaks. So I was a dog owner, really. And as most people know, the only reason I got into horse racing as an owner was my mother, who was a retired nurse. And it was for her. And I met Paul Barber, who's an absolute legend of a man. And he said that, you know, that he'd be interested in having partnership with a couple of horses with my mum. So it basically started as just that. I would never have been a racehorse owner, and actually never was. It was always in my mum's name. But about the third or fourth horse that we bought with Paul Barber was Denman, and that sort of changed things a bit. And I felt it was the duty to sort of promote Denman and Corto Star and do what you could to promote, because these were two special horses, probably the two most special 3.25 mile chasers in my lifetime. And some of the buzzes with Denman I'm a dog man, but some of the buzzes owning Denman or being around Denman was I remember the day you were there with the Hennessy, and both Hennessy's were incredible. The first one, when we knew he was going to piss up when he, you know, a circuit out, or certainly when he jumped the fifth last on the side. And but another great thing I remember is when he was a novice chaser in his first year as a novice chaser. And he went to Cheltenham and he took on Don't Push It, a horse of McManus's, JP McManus's. And we kept shoveling it on Denman, 8 to 11, 4, 5, 8. And we kept drifting out again. And obviously JP McManus had lumped on Don't Push It, like 11 to 2 into 9 to 4. And he fancied beating us. And to be fair, he wasn't far wrong. We only won by, I think it was a length and a quarter. But they had an absolute war. And I remember being there when he beat Don't Push It. And that was afternoon at Cheltenham that I'll never forget.
Then, unfortunately, something very badly happened, because there was a disgusting decision when you were disqualified because you backed one of your horses and then you decided to hedge money, lay in back, which is not a criminal act according to the rule of racing. That was very bad for you, I think. Then the appeal, you won the appeal anyway.
I won the appeal hands down. I had 11 different barristers want to work for me for nothing to clear my name, but the damage was done.
11 different barristers.
That's
11 different barristers.
11 different barristers offered their services for nothing to take them on, because everyone knew it was a setup. And, you know, a lot of people thought it was personal with Paul Roy and, you know, whoever else was involved. But I'm sure it was more to do with the tote. I was on the verge of having a low margin tote in Ireland then, with Global Wagering from San Diego, and we had Ed coming. We were trying to get this low margin tote stuff, which is happening now, which we can talk about in a minute. And I believe that was the reason they come after me. I believe that.
Right. Okay.
I believe that we've had to get this off the ground now. In the last few months, it's been painstakingly difficult. So many people were trying to stop us from doing it, because it will be a revolution. It will be a revolution, and the plan is, the reason why I'm working with Alex Frost is ultimately I believe that we must have a low margin tote on the horses, like Lifford Dogs, the dog track I'm involved with. We have a 10% win and place takeout.
Yes.
On the tote.
Hold on a second, because I want to move, as you say, to the dogs, because you were involved. I had Sir Mark Prescott on stage a few weeks ago, and he was thinking very high of you, of course, and he said that you were keen on coursing. This is a special, what can I say, a special discipline where a dog has to follow a hare, turning her down and to win the race. And your dog, Big Fella Thanks, which I have seen in your house at Bath, and then again at Newbury, he won the Derby at Clonmel in Ireland. That was something out of this world.
Oh, that's the best moment of my life, and I think about it every day. Watch it most days. No, I mean the coursing is the most. Sir Mark Prescott's the most passionate coursing man I've ever met in my life. As I said in the Waterloo Cup, the last ever Waterloo Cup, the last day, I genuinely think I thought Sir Mark was going to pass out. He just looked ill, and I remember meeting him, talking to him a year ago at his stables in Newmarket, and he said that Harry, he said, I had no idea just how bad it was that day. He said, because I didn't realise that all those people I'd seen every year, 5, 6, 7, 8 times a year at coursing meetings, I'm never going to see them again. And this was like 10 years later, and he said, and I never have seen them again. And he just, however bad it was, that final Waterloo Cup for Sir Mark Prescott, it ended up even being worse, because you don't realise you don't see these people ever again. And they were a tight knit band, and for me,
what happened exactly to Sir Mark Prescott in that cup?
Well, they decided, because of the hares and the antis, that there'd be no more. That it was going to be the last ever Waterloo Cup. So that was traumatic enough for Sir Mark in itself. But as time has proved, he's not just doesn't just miss out on the course, and he misses out on the camaraderie and friendship of those coursing people that he'd built up over his life. Sir Mark had the 2000 Millennium, which the 2000 Millennium coursing, and they were coursing Irish Deerhounds and Whippets, and it was a fantastic meeting. It was a bit unlucky with the field, but it was a great thing. And I remember I had a dog called Denman, funny enough, a bitch in the quarter final of the Oaks, and Mark Prescott had a bitch taking me on that morning, and we were meeting in the quarterfinals, and we were out in the field with the dogs so early in the morning. It was a misty morning, and we stood and shook hands, and it's a moment I'll never ever forget. It was so Denmania won, but she didn't win the Oaks. She beat Mark's bitch about a length and a half, and then I think she got beat in the semis. But that was a very, very special moment for me that with Mark that morning, and
then couple of years ago, probably, you started to be involved with this, how can you say, course for dogs, greyhound, Lifford, which Lifford, if I well remember, is very close, is in Ireland, but very close to the Northern Ireland border. So when the meetings are on, you got people coming from the Northern Ireland and from the Republic of Ireland attending. And you had this idea of putting the tote in place with 10% takeout for every kind of bets. How come that you had, before you start replying, I want to tell you something. A few weeks ago, I had Alan Newman, that now is 84. Alan Newman is still a bookmaker for dogs, which is phenomenal. And he explained me, because I asked him about the percentage the bookmakers are betting now with the dogs, and he said, unfortunately, we have to bet at a certain percentage, which is extremely high. So there are 6 runners over 20%, because they say the owner of the stadiums are the owner of the betting shop, so they don't want to risk money, so they want to get a theoretical margin very high. So with your idea of having the tote on course with 10% take out, of course, you will win the race.
Yeah, that's a good lead in, Carlo, because we're going back to what we were saying. And Alan Newman, I remember him, the first night I ever went dog racing in my life was at Slough on a Saturday night. And after one race, I knew my life was changed. That was Saturday night when I was almost nearly 16, 1977. And someone told me after Slough Dogs that they actually race greyhounds at Wembley Stadium outside the football pitch. And I thought they were taking the piss. I just couldn't believe it. I went to school on the Monday and left as soon as the bell went, run down the hill to High Wycombe, got the train to Wembley. I think the first race was 7:45 and I was there when the door opened, and I just couldn't believe it. The silver starting traps with the curve and the beautiful grass it was in those days. And I remember Alan Newman with his ginger hair, clear as a bell. He was one of the loudest bookmakers there. And I fell in love with it straight away. I remember all the Wembley bookmakers. John Power was there, and there were some real characters, and I learned a lot from him as a teenager. And I clearly remember Alan Newman the first night I went to Wembley Dogs. And yes, and even from those days, from the late 70s, I've been trying to tell people to take low margin at dog tracks. In Italy, I used to go up the track there was 2 tracks in Italy, one in Naples and one in Rome, near Ponte Marconi Bridge. And the tote takeout there was so bad. And they'd have bookmakers, 3 bookmakers would bet win and 3 bookmakers would bet who finished second. That was Naples and Rome. And I said to them then, why don't you just have because they'd have a 34% takeout like they do in England now. England has become like Italy and Spain and Greece and all the tracks that are completely clueless and just keep putting it up and up and up. But now that we've actually got a chance to bring it down, Lifford's 10%, but more importantly, Shelbourne Park have gone down to 12.5, cutting it in half.
For the Derby.
For the Derby, for the last 3 weeks of the Derby. And that's the biggest event in the world, the best track in the world. And now, because they took so much more money than they expected, they've extended the trial for another 2 months until the end of January. Now, Carla, the exciting thing is, I have no doubt that this will be a massive success over the next 2 months. And I honestly believe that from February next year, I can't see any scenario where all the tracks don't do it, And in England, greed beyond comparison, where they now take out 33, 34%. Punters cannot win. Nobody who goes to the Dogs for the first time has £1 on the tote or £2 on the tote can ever win. So now that they can, things are going to, at Shelbourne all over Christmas, I know that £2, £1, £5 punters on the tote are going to get much more than they used to get. Money, it's real Robin Hood stuff, to be honest. Yes, and I believe it will catch on big time.
Yes, because, how can you bet if the takeout for the tote or if the margin for the bookmaker is 6% per dog? On horses, the margin should be, the net margin should be 1.5%. And we are maybe that we have 20 runners or 21 runners or 8 runners or 10 runners. The dogs, there are 6 runners, and the bookmakers, they had to bet at 6%. The tote has to be at 6%, and the bookmakers, they bet probably at 4 or 5%, which is ridiculous. So I'm pretty sure that this idea which you had for Lifford will expand all over the world of greyhound racing.
Well, you see, the thing is, if the trial is a big success, the reason why I've been working with Alex Frost at Tote UK is because when I originally said, will you do dogs at 10% and promise me there'll be no rebate? And he was interested because I told him,
Sorry,
I believe.
I interrupt you. The rebate is a sort of a commission which the
big
dog
players
owners gave back to the big players.
Yeah, I wrote about it exclusively in my book. There was a whole chapter on more or less on how damaging they are for totes. But the Irish don't have any rebate. And I believe that the Lifford model of 10% win on course, we're going to have that 2-month trial now where we try it at Shelbourne. But imagine Punchestown. There's a 3-day Punchestown meeting, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Now, Horse Racing Ireland, we're actually using Horse Racing Ireland's handhelds at Lifford Dogs to experiment how the handheld works. And we'll be using plenty of them at Shelbourne. They will be using plenty of them at Shelbourne next year when the derby's earlier and people are outside. And the take last week at Shelbourne was through the roof, but people weren't even getting on because there was just so many people trying to bet on the tote, they couldn't get on.
But now you mentioned Punchestown for horse racing because there will be the same experiment.
No, there won't be, but there should be and there could be. And I believe there will be when Shelbourne takes off. Because you imagine, I've been at the Punchestown Festival that early February meeting for the last 3 or 4 years. And the gambling is fantastic. Now, imagine if they do, at the moment, Horse Racing Ireland has a 20% takeout in the win pool and 25 in the place, which is staggeringly stupid and naive and daft because with the round downs where they 137 becomes 130, etc., the place market is the biggest scam in the world. So why on earth the win takeout is more than the place? A 4-year-old could work out that the place should be less, and it's more. But you just imagine Punchestown. Say they gave the experiment the quietest day, the Sunday. If you had the Friday and Saturday with a 20% win tote on course at Punchestown and a 25 place for the first 2 days, and then the Sunday, say, just one day out of the 3, try it with 10% win and place. And if they did that for 3 days, as you say, it's all over because Cheltenham, they do it everywhere. And I dream, I envisage they hedge the track bookies hedge at Lifford on the tote. And I have dreamt of imagining bookmakers at Punchestown in the future running from the pitches, going up to the tote and having 200-300 quid on a horse, hedging on the tote. And then
hedging on the tote instead of hedging on Betfair.
Yeah, or anywhere. Yes, I believe. We call it the exchanges now. It could be Betfair is losing sight of the goal, and Max Book is stepping up to the plate a bit more. So when we talk about Betfair now, it's more or less the exchanges. But I believe Betfair have lost sight of the goal a bit and given others a chance. But what we do need is that third option. And we need the SP that you're talking about, where it has to be 128, 130. That's going to have to come down. That's going to have to come down. If the tote's running at 12.5s and 10s and the exchanges are running at 5s and 6s, they won't be able to say to Alan Newman, look, you've got to bet to 128 or 130%. You've got to bet to 120, 118 to become competitive. And that is why I got disqualified for laying Denman for 19 quid. That is why all the trainers that my mum had horses with all got a visit from the Metropolitan Police, crooked stuff, saying that I was a gangster and that I was using other people's accounts to lay these bets and I was the worst man on the planet because they didn't want my low margin experiment coming out. And it wouldn't have come out if it wasn't for the GRI chief executive, Tim Lucy. So many people have tried to stop it. Alex Frost, even after I got warned off and all that stuff, Alex Frost was going to do 6% on a derby at Nottingham. He was going to do 6% on a derby at Toaster, 10% on a derby at Toaster. And every time the plug was pulled, legal issues there. No one would give this low margin experiment a chance. But the GRI have done it. And let me assure you, the genie is out of the bottle. And the bookmakers will have to bring their takeouts down. The greyhound racing industry, especially, has been abused by the bookmakers and the media gravy train who say nothing and do nothing and let the train go round and round and round and collect their bag of cash every year. And none of them give nothing back to the sport or to the greyhounds themselves. And the only way to give them dogs the respect they deserve is to lower that margin, give punters a chance, give the girls who go to the bank once a year. They'll do it this Christmas at Shelbourne. 12 girls will jump in a minibus and go from the bank. And instead of going back on Monday and only Julie and Debbie breaking level and 10 of them doing their bollocks, 4 of them will win, 2 of them will break level, and 1 of them might have a touch. And then guess what? Guess what? They don't wait till Christmas to go back the next year. They go back in February, and they go back in March and April, and they return. And that's what's going to happen.
Yes, no, I understand. But of course, if you watch the television on Saturday for the big meeting, ITV, for horse racing, on top of the names of the runners, they put the over-round, I mean, of the bookmakers, and which is good, I think, because the people, they start understanding what the over-round is and what the over-round should be. And I noticed that sometimes the bookmakers on course, they work at 1.5% per runner, which is not bad. But of course, as Alan Newman said, if I have to work on a course for the dogs, and I have to with 6 runners, and I have to work at 25%, this is a robbery, it's a legal robbery. So I think that your idea has completely revolutionized the world. But since day one, I met you at Goodwood, if you remember, many years ago. I understood that I say, oh my God, this guy is a genius. He knows something that other people, they don't know. Anyway, just finishing our conversation, which I think was very, very good and very informative. I hope to see you soon, because I have to say that Harry and I, we see each other once or twice a year in Taunton, where there is a fantastic restaurant, Augustus, if you remember, where they have the best lamb in the world. And I hope that
full circle, because that restaurant is the best restaurant in Taunton. And then, funny enough, it's owned by the family of Richard Barber, Paul Barber's brother.
Paul Barber, okay. Anyway, and I hope that your friend Julian Snow will join us as usual. Julian Snow has been world number one in the old tennis, the Jeu de Paume, and he's a fantastic guy. And we had a very, very good time at that restaurant. And maybe that during Cheltenham next week, I will be able to come down for dinner. Harry, I wish to thank you very much. And I wish you all the best for this dog's track, Lifford, which, by the way, now is on SIS, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, on SIS. It's on SIS on Sunday nights, and we also race Saturday nights. And as I say, Shelbourne Park now for the next 2 months. That's going to be on the Tote UK along with us. And 2 good months, and anything can happen. And I really appreciate the chance to come on here and talk about it.
Thank you very much, Harry. You have been very welcome, and I hope to see you soon.
Cheers, Carlo. All the best, mate. Don't forget to go to the Grotto. He lives near the best pizza restaurant in the world, the Grotto in Bellagio. It's not very expensive. It's very casual, but for me, it's the best in the world. So if I was over there,
because you mentioned Lake Como, I want to remember you something special, because one day you took some guys from England to Italy to watch a Juventus match in the Champions League or so, and you stay at the Villa d'Este in Chernobyl, and then you lost a big bet and you had to sleep under the bridge in Torino. You remember that?
I always used to stay in that hotel. I used to love it. I had a great steam bath, but no,
I exaggerate a little bit.
It wasn't. Yeah, I remember we took a lot of lads to 6 games in Italy. We took a lot of lads to 6 games in 7 days, and whatever stake I was having, because I was looking after the lads, I thought, karma, I'm going to double my bets. I'll double every bet. So all 6 matches we lost. So there was. I think that's the trip you're talking about. There was definitely no karma in that trip.
Bye. Have a good day.
Cheers, Carlo. Thanks, mate.
Bye.